Okay, so I've had a number of different questions about the second assessment item on working with data, and it's focusing on the world's toughest sport um, concept and data set that we've collected as a part of working in the unit, and we have obviously replicated that data set from the original survey that was done with ESPN. I will just bring up and from beginning. So we can go through a number of different questions that I've received, and I will talk through these. The goal of this assignment is to get you thinking creatively. I've tried to say, at least in the tutors that I've been involved in, and I think a lot of the other tutors as well, would reinforce this. This assignment is not something that comes with a very clear right or wrong answer. This is something that we want you to take a little bit of a creative approach. You can use some liberal interpretations. We want you to build a compelling narrative and an interesting storyline when it comes to you telling us, as we're marking this, about what you believe to be the world's toughest sport, or what you think could be. And I'll get to that in just 1 second. I have had some questions just around which versions of the data set we can use. I will be making a separate video on the data sets that I have uploaded and put on the Canvas page for this assessment. That will also be going up at the same time as this video, and it will come out to you in an announcement. But in short, I would really like and appreciate for you to use the UTS dataset that we collected as a part of replicating the ESPN survey. You can also, and I would encourage you, if you wanted to, and fitted the storyline that you were coming up with, I would encourage you to use the ESPN dataset as well. These are both available to you there. So I want you to just stop and think for a second. You have the top line, okay? You're bringing a sport to us. It might be boxing because it's done really well across both data sets. It might be a random other sport, and you're going to take a particular angle with that other sport, but you're taking that top line and then you're coming to us and you're supporting that information in the first instance with these data sets, or at least one of them. And how you use these is up to you. I don't want to tell you how to construct your narrative. I don't want to tell you how to make your visualizations. I don't want to tell you what you think the storyline should be as you tell us what is happening. I want you to just think creatively about that. I also have some other questions, and the rest. Sorry, I will just pause there for a second. I had some questions specifically asking whether or not we need to use the UTS dataset. There are some things in the rubric about the selection of variables and the selection of data points. And I think if you just avoid using data sets altogether, and your argument then therefore becomes a little bit weaker, depending on how those two things fit together, you could end up with a much more reduced mark across those different components of the rubric. So I want you to think very carefully about how you kind of align your thinking relative to those different components of the rubric. I've also just mentioned that if you find other forms of data, other tables, other things that are online, other things that have come out of articles, if you want to copy and paste them, drop them into Excel and make your own graphs from those things, you are certainly encouraged to do so. That becomes a very valuable part of the supporting information as a part of this assignment. So if it supports your argument, if it supports the stance that you're taking, if it supports the sport that you're bringing as a part of this assignment, I would encourage you to do that. Um, there were some other questions I had as well, just around the fact that are we allowed to use the same data sets from the tutorials that we've had, particularly across probably the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks, and use those in this assignment? Yes, you certainly can. And we'll clarify that. As you can see on the screen here, we have World's Toughest Sport original ESPN experts. That is the 12 experts who answered this questionnaire initially. They did the original version of this survey. The original data set is how it was already exported out of Qualtrics, which is the survey platform that we used to collect this data. If you remember from the tutes, the original data set had a very large number of columns. It was very wide. And there was only, I think, about 400 observations or 400 rows, individual people responding to it, because that sort of made up our cohort. The extended data set is exactly the same as the longest data set from our tutorials. So if you remember, and you've come to some recent tutorials, the extended data set is the longest data set, and it has much less columns, but it has something in the vicinity of about 221,000 rows. So again, that will feature in a separate video, but that is definitely something that you can use. If you choose to use one of the data sets from the tutorials, and it's the same as the extended data set, but it has some visualizations, some pivot tables, some things in there that are from the tute, you're certainly welcome to use it. It is the same data. I had another question. Can I make graphs using data from other papers? This sort of links back to the previous slide. Yes, you can, but it must be in support of data from the surveys. It cannot replace it. So you can't just disregard both the UTS data set and the ESPN data set. I mean, I would certainly want you to be focusing on the UTS data set because we've spent such a long amount of time working on that in our classes. But you can't disregard the stuff that we've done with those surveys and then just say, hey, like, this is what I'm using as my argument for framing the world's toughest sport. If you bring data in from another location, from another website, from another article, from another piece of work, it has to be referenced. And I'll have a little section here on citations and references. but it does have to be referenced. Choice of software for the slide. I had some questions specifically around, do we have to use Microsoft PowerPoint? The answer is no, you do not. You can use anything you want. You can use Canva, you can use any other type of software that allows you to make something in the form of an infographic. PowerPoint is a Microsoft product. You do have access to it through your Office 365 UTS accounts in the same way that you have got Excel. And for that reason, because it is a Microsoft product, it is compatible with Excel. So if you copy graphs from Excel into PowerPoint, it may end up making those graphs easy to work with. A lot of the functions that we've got with adding shapes, with adding features, arrows, and other things, they are available in the same way that they are in Excel. They're available in PowerPoint. I'm not 100% sure with Canva in terms of compatibility between things. You might be saving stuff as an image file and then converting it into Canva. You are certainly welcome to do that. That is completely fine as long as it is submitted as a PDF file. So I think the key thing here is if the piece of software you're using creates something visually pretty and interesting and conveys the message that you need, if it can convert the end document to a PDF, that is fine. Citations. So I've had a number of different questions about referencing, and I think this is really important that we stick to a particular standard. So I think in some of the other units that you would have done in first year as you came through either the exercise science or the sports management degrees, you would have been asked to use APA referencing. The most recent version of APA referencing is the 7th edition. I just have shown you with the screenshot there. You can go to Google, type in APA referencing 7 UTS. The first thing that comes up is the UTS website. It's the same website that's there below. There is a whole document and guideline sort of PDF document that elaborates on how we can use both a combination of in-text citations. So, for example, if I've taken this data set from this website and I'm bringing it over to this part of my infographic, I will say Jenkins and Smith, 2007, and then there'll be a way that we have the reference come out at the end as well. I would encourage you to go look at that document and use it if you haven't already done that. But it is there, and citations will be valued and certainly factored into the marking as a part of the rubric. Average size of the infographic. So I would say, yes, as a bare minimum, we're looking at a landscape A4 piece of paper for the centerpiece, the main slide that has the infographic on it. If you were trying to figure out how many different things to have on that infographic, I'm just giving this to you as a ballpark figure, right? As a guess. But if you're looking for an average number of items, you'd be looking at about 4 to 5 things: graphs, text, facts, numbers, tables, or otherwise. It doesn't matter. If you have 10, but it works and the infographic looks really good, that's completely fine. If you have 3 and everything flows, makes sense, and you have a large amount of annotations, but they work with the pictures, that's fine as well. So honestly, I think it really comes back to this thing that I said at the start of this video around it being creative, around you needing to think about, well, what do I actually need to support the argument that I'm making? And how do I then map that to a single page? It's almost like a poster that I'm creating, but it's going to be in the form of an A4 piece of paper, and someone's going to look at it and go, okay, well, I feel pretty satisfied. This is good. I feel pretty satisfied that this is something that really does show a clear message to me. And I've walked away thinking I understand what they said. I have had some questions about the second slide. So this can be portrait or landscape. Again, A4. It is only offering supporting and justifying information for the main slide. So there are no pictures here. It's not stylistically pretty. It's not full of colors. It is something that is offering additional context. Like if you think there are things that you can't have because of being crowded or because of it being too much for that initial slide, I am offering you the second slide to use to offer that additional context and to justify things or to explain things. You don't have to go into a huge amount of detail here. Like you don't have to say, I have set the axis margins to this for this reason. I just need you to explain to me, look, you know, we've included this supporting information for this reason. You know, we believe this supporting information actually does show a greater level of clarity around why this particular sport is tough for this reason. It's additional information that is being provided to you to give you a bit of a buffer, if that makes sense. If you go through the rubric, you'll realize very quickly most of the marks are going to relate to your centerpiece, that first slide. So if you need to use the second slide and you need to actually provide that additional information and provide some supporting documentation for what you've done, then I think that is valuable. I've put some parameters in place here. So we don't want a font size smaller than size 11. And if you have references and you feel like you need to use the entirety of that second slide for the justifying information, we can have references sit on an additional page. They do not have to crowd into the second slide. The second thing I want to add here is the citations rule also applies for the second slide. Like if you're offering new information, contextualizing information, references from articles, references from books, references from websites, we still apply the same rules. APA 7th edition. There were some questions around analysis. So do I need to use statistics? In particular, do I need to use things like correlations and regressions? I have amended and softened this in the rubric and also in the descriptions to state very specifically, I would encourage you to use different types of stats. Descriptive statistics like means, standard deviations, and other things that will come through in visualizations, and other test statistics. If you don't know what a test statistic is, go to week 5. Like correlations and regressions, they can be used if they suit the narrative of your slide. So you are not being forced to use things like correlations and regressions if they do not suit the actual narrative or the storyline of what it is that you're creating with your infographic. And for that reason, you will not be penalized if you don't end up using correlations or regressions and you don't need them. As you'll see in the rubric, a lot of it comes back to things like how did you present the information? Was your argument clear? How did you end up visualizing things? How did you use the survey data? So I want you to stick to what is it that you want to show, get it out on a page, make it as visually appeasing as possible, and don't stress too much about trying to cram everything that we've learned across the different weeks into this particular infographic, particularly correlations and regressions, if you don't think that they fit. If you do think that they fit, include them, but if you don't think that they fit, that's fine. I did have a question around the framing of the argument. I think this is quite an important one, and I think it is relevant, particularly to probably a number of different options if you picked a sport that's sat a little bit lateral to a number of the obvious choices. The main premise of this is sort of stating this is the world's toughest sport, and this is why. Some of the questions I had were, could we also argue this might be the world's toughest sport, or this could be the world's toughest sport? I will allow this if you add sufficient information in that explains why that uncertainty around your justification is warranted. So, for example, if you say, hey, ice hockey might well be the world's toughest sport, your infographic needs to explain why you don't have that level of certainty around why it might be the world's toughest sport. You're alluding to the fact that it could be, but you're sort of also alluding to the fact that it could not be. And that might need you to include some information on limitations to do with the data, other pieces of information that have been captured over time that potentially point to the fact that it's not, or whatnot. So I think we need to focus on this question here underpinning taking a sport and pitching it from the angle of being tough or the toughest sport. I also had a question saying, can we do an infographic that focuses on why this isn't the world's toughest sport? No. For clarity of marking, for consistency, we are focusing on what is the toughest, okay? And I'm giving you a little bit of leniency with being able to say this might be the world's toughest sport, or this could be the world's toughest sport, but that's it. I'm not going to go beyond that. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. That's it in a nutshell. So they are frequently asked questions. I will upload another video that goes through some more technical information that might be of use for everybody. Remember, there's a centerpiece slide, and a lot of marks relate to that centerpiece slide. So really think very carefully about what you actually believe could be the world's toughest sport, or is the world's toughest sport, and get that out onto that page and convince us. Good luck with your assignment.